My mom kicked me out of the restaurant after I spilled wine on her perfect daughter's dress. It was an accident. She said, "This is why you'll always be the backup." I left, called a contact, and 10 days later. I was raised in San Antonio, Texas, in a modest 2-bedroom duplex with my mom, Lizette. My dad left when I was 10. Not in a tragic, middle-of-the-night kind of way, just drifted away after years of passive detachment and long work trips. He fell in love with someone new. Started over. The kind of story we all learn to accept quietly when we're still too young to realize how much that kind of abandonment hardwired itself into you. My mom remarried pretty quickly after that. A guy named Hal, who was decent enough on paper, quiet, and mostly indifferent to me, but he had a daughter, Sloane. She was 8 when they married. Blonde, blue-eyed, all dimples and charm. Sloane and I weren't enemies, but we were never really sisters either. We coexisted. But there was always a difference in how we were treated. Mom was hard on me. She expected excellence, manners, humility, and maturity, especially after the divorce. With Sloane, she was soft. Forgiving. Easily amused. When I got a B+, I was asked, what happened? When Sloane got a C-, Mom would say, she's just not a math person. It was subtle at first. Quiet favoritism. A double standard that grew teeth over time. I moved out at 18 and paid my own way through college in Austin. I worked food service jobs, waitressed on the weekends, and graduated with a business degree and more grit than most people I knew. I got into digital events, campaign launches, nonprofit fundraisers, even the occasional high-end wedding. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. And I was good at it. Meanwhile, Sloane floated. She tried modeling for a while in Dallas, married a dentist, divorced him within 2 years, then started a lifestyle blog filled with curated photos, half-hearted recipes, and vacation pictures she either staged or borrowed. She had the look, and that carried her. She wasn't a bad person, just privileged in a way that made her unaware of how easy her life was compared to mine. Lizette never saw the difference. Or maybe she just chose not to. For years, I kept my distance. Holiday dinners. Occasional phone calls. But when Mom called last year to tell me she was finally opening her own restaurant, her lifelong dream, I felt something soften. She'd worked in HR her whole life but had always wanted to run her own place. It was called Olive Plus Time, and it was her baby. She asked me to help with the opening event. Said she needed my expertise. I agreed, thinking it might be a turning point. A chance to reconnect, to finally be seen as someone worth respecting. I took 2 weeks off work. Booked local influencers. Managed RSVPs, coordinated vendors and lighting and press coverage. I pulled strings and called in favors. I even got the mayor's communications office to confirm a +1 for the deputy. I didn't charge a dime. The night of the event, I showed up in a dark green midi dress and low heels. Simple. Classy. I was tired but proud. Everything had come together beautifully, the venue was perfect, the lighting was warm and elegant, the hors d'oeuvres were flawless. The smell of rosemary and roasted garlic filled the air, and jazz music played softly through hidden speakers. When I arrived, Sloane was already there, dressed in a sleek ivory silk gown and heels that probably cost more than my rent. She posed for photos in front of the branded wall. I watched her take selfies and whisper to guests. Her name was on the program, creative consultant. Mine wasn't. Not even in the acknowledgements. I brushed it off. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Mom had meant to include me and forgot. I walked up to her with a smile, and she gave me a distracted kiss on the cheek. "You look nice," she said, barely glancing at me. Then she turned to introduce Sloane to some investors. I stood there awkwardly and slowly backed away. At one point, I was handing a glass of wine to one of the reporters I'd personally invited when Sloane spun too fast near me, twirling her dress like she was in a fashion show, and her arm bumped mine. One of the glasses tilted. Pinot Noir, dark and unforgiving, splashed down the front of her ivory dress. She gasped. Loud. Then stared at me like I'd just sabotaged her wedding. Everyone turned to look. I froze. "Oh God, Sloane, I'm so sorry." "It was an accident." Before I could say another word, Mom stormed over. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't check on me. She didn't even look at the wine on the floor or acknowledge the crowd now watching us. She hissed, under her breath but loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "This is why you'll always be the backup." And then she turned away. Just like that. My throat tightened. I felt heat rush to my face, and for a second I couldn't breathe. Backup? After everything I'd done, after years of being reliable, quiet, helpful, I was the backup? I walked straight out the side door. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't make a scene. I didn't even take my coat. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring out at the glittering lights of the Pearl District. I kept hearing her voice in my head. Backup. Like I was the understudy to my own life. To Sloane's show. Like everything I'd done, every time I held back my resentment, every polite nod, every offer to help, meant nothing. I don't know what made me do it, but I called Devin. He's a contact from Austin, an investor who consults with restaurant groups and nonprofits. We met a couple years ago during a campaign I helped plan for a councilwoman. He's smart, connected, and has always been respectful. I hadn't spoken to him in a while, but when he picked up, I heard the concern in his voice immediately. "Delaney," he said. "You okay?" I wasn't. But I lied and said, "I've got a business idea." That call changed everything. Devin didn't ask too many questions on the phone, which I appreciated. I think he could hear it in my voice, that weird cocktail of exhaustion and rage and heartbreak that's hard to explain unless you've felt it. I told him I needed a break from San Antonio, and he invited me up to Dallas for a few days. Said he had some people he wanted me to meet. He didn't push, didn't overpromise. Just said, "Come up. Let's talk." I packed the next morning. I left the wine-stained dress crumpled in a laundry basket, still smelling faintly of rosemary and shame. I didn't tell my mom I was leaving. She didn't check on me that night anyway. When I got to Dallas, I stayed in a modest Airbnb in Bishop Arts. I didn't need anything fancy, I just needed space to think. Devin picked me up for lunch the next day, and we went to this sleek little cafe tucked behind a florist shop. Very Dallas. Very curated. We talked for nearly 3 hours. I told him everything. Not just about the restaurant opening, but the years leading up to it. How I'd always been the one who quietly held everything together while my mother fawned over Sloane. How Sloane's mistakes were forgiven, even celebrated, while mine were scrutinized. How I thought maybe, just maybe, helping with the restaurant would finally shift something. He listened without interrupting. He didn't try to fix it, just let me say the things I'd never said out loud. Then he leaned back and said, "You ever think about doing this for yourself?" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt absurd. Do what? This. Events. Strategy. Development. But for something bigger than other people's parties. Something you build. I blinked. I don't know. I've always worked behind the scenes. Exactly, he said. You know how to run the show. You just haven't had the mic. I didn't say anything for a while. I just sat there, turning his words over like puzzle pieces. That's when he told me about a new hospitality project in development. He and a couple of partners were looking to build a series of boutique culinary experiences, part restaurant, part community space, all female-led. They wanted people who weren't just figureheads. They wanted substance. Quiet leadership. Systems thinkers. "I think you'd be a good fit," he said. "If you're interested." It wasn't a job offer, exactly. It was an open door. And I'd been standing outside for too long. The next week was a blur. I met his partners, Reisa and Min, 2 women in their early 40s who had left big city restaurant management roles and were now building their own blueprint. They had funding, a location being scouted in Deep Ellum, and the kind of grounded energy that made me feel like I wasn't being interviewed, I was being invited. I showed them my event portfolio, walked them through mock launch calendars, outlined digital campaigns for their proposed locations. It wasn't performative. I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. It was the first time in years I felt like I was being taken seriously. Meanwhile, back in San Antonio, Mom was still throwing soft openings and influencer brunches at all of plus time. I heard through a mutual contact that she was telling people I left the party out of embarrassment and that I was sensitive. Sloane had apparently written a blog post about navigating setbacks gracefully and used some thinly veiled metaphor about stains that remind us to stay humble. I didn't even bother to respond. I'd spent my whole life explaining myself. I was done. But the bitterness didn't disappear. I kept waking up with this pit in my stomach, like I'd swallowed a stone and it hadn't passed yet. The betrayal wasn't just about the wine incident. It was everything that led to it. Every unacknowledged effort. Every moment I swallowed my pride to be the good daughter. Every time I stood on the sidelines while Sloane got the applause. Devin must have sensed it because one night over Thai takeout, he said, "You know you don't owe them anything, right?" And I said, "I know. But I didn't really. Not yet." 10 days after the restaurant opening, I officially accepted a consulting contract with the team in Dallas. Not just an event role, but a partner track. A title. A say in the future of something real. I called my boss in Austin and gave my notice with a clear heart. She was supportive, even said she always knew I was meant for bigger things. That meant more than I expected. The weirdest part was how natural it all felt. Like I'd spent so long bracing for rejection that when something finally worked out, I didn't know how to let it in. I moved into a short-term rental while I got things settled, and started spending long hours in planning sessions. We were designing something modern but rooted in community: pop-up chef residencies, art nights, storytelling dinners. A place for women who never got the spotlight to finally take center stage. It was everything I hadn't realized I needed to be a part of. And yet, the silence from my mom loomed large. No call. No apology. Not even a message. I half wondered if she even cared that I left. That I was gone for good. But then, on day 11, she texted. Not a phone call. Just a short message that said, "Saw the article in D Magazine. Proud of you. Wish you'd told me." That was it. No mention of what happened. No acknowledgement of the insult. Just a passive note, as if she had been left out. I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't reply. I didn't have anything left to say. I didn't respond to her text. I wasn't trying to make a point or be dramatic, I just genuinely didn't have anything to say that wouldn't come out tangled and angry. Proud of you felt like a pat on the head, not an olive branch. Wish you'd told me reads like blame. I didn't owe her an explanation anymore. The thing about pulling away from a toxic family dynamic is that the silence feels weird at first. It's not peaceful immediately. It's awkward and loud and uncomfortable, like your whole body's waiting for the next punch that never lands. But after a few more days in Dallas, the weight started to lift. I was finding a rhythm. Planning strategy meetings with Raisa and Min, working with a local creative team on branding concepts, helping scout interior designers. We were building something entirely new. Something not built on status or appearance or curated family Instagram posts. We were building from the ground up, and this time, my hands were on the blueprint. Still, there were moments when the grief snuck in. Grief doesn't always come from death. Sometimes it comes from letting go of people who are very much alive but never loved you in the way you needed. One night, I saw Sloane had posted a reel from Olive Plus Time, a sunlit brunch scene, perfect latte art, a caption about supporting local female entrepreneurs. I felt this strange mix of nausea and rage. She'd never lifted a finger to build that place. I'd helped lay the bricks, so to speak, but I'd been erased. That post had over 1,000 likes. The comments were full of praise. Such a stunning space. You're such an inspiration, Sloane. I wanted to scream. Instead, I closed the app, put on a playlist of old soul music, and went back to the floor plan mock-up I was sketching. Work became my therapy. About 3 weeks after I moved to Dallas, Devin invited me to a private networking dinner. Nothing huge, just 12 people, mostly in food and hospitality, a few from the local art scene. He said it'd be low-key and I didn't need to perform. But as the date got closer, I felt the anxiety creeping in. It wasn't the people, I could handle strangers. It was the idea of walking into a room where I might actually be respected. Seen. Expected to be equal. That was a different kind of pressure than the one I'd grown up with. But I went. The dinner was held in a converted warehouse in the design district. Long communal table. Edison bulbs. The kind of space where no one had to shout to be heard. I wore a navy jumpsuit and boots. Nothing showy. And for the first time in what felt like forever, people listened to me speak without looking past me. They asked questions and didn't interrupt. They cared about my experience, not just my presentation. I talked about event infrastructure, contingency planning, and brand strategy. I cracked a few jokes. People laughed. Not because I was Sloane's sister or Lizette's daughter, but because I was Delaney, and I had something to say. By the end of the night, 2 people had asked for meetings. One woman, a culinary consultant from Fort Worth, said, "You remind me of myself 10 years ago, but you're further ahead than I was." That one stuck with me. I walked home that night feeling like I was wearing a new skin. Not a mask. A skin that finally fits. Of course, it didn't take long for word to trickle back to San Antonio. A week after the dinner, I got a call from an old family friend, Sonia, someone who had known my mom for decades. She was one of those distant aunts you see every other Christmas and who always smells like jasmine and gives brutally honest advice. She didn't waste time. "I'm going to say this once," she said. "You don't owe that woman anything." I was caught off guard. "Sonia? She's telling people you're being dramatic. That you stormed out over a little accident. That you're holding a grudge." I told her she should be thanking you for not walking out years ago. I laughed, because I didn't know what else to do. "She won't admit she was wrong," Sonia added. "But she knows. Believe me, she knows." I didn't respond to Sloane's latest blog post either. It was titled, "When Sisters Drift Apart, Graceful Boundaries and Self-Care." The entire thing was a veiled dig, full of syrupy wisdom like, "Sometimes people can't handle your light, and that's okay." A commenter even wrote, "It's sad your sister's jealousy is ruining your bond." Sloane liked it. I almost typed a reply. Something snarky. Something true. But I didn't. Because by then, I was starting to understand something that had taken me most of my life to learn. Some people don't want you to win unless they can take credit for it. That was never going to be the case again. Then came the email. 2 days after Sloane's blog post went up, I got an email from a local food and lifestyle magazine in San Antonio. They were running a feature on new culinary spaces across Texas and had heard about the Dallas project I was working on. They wanted to interview me. Me. Not Sloane. Not Lizette. Me. I took the call in my apartment, sitting cross-legged on my couch with a mug of cold tea and my laptop perched on a pillow. I told the story, not the family version, but the real story. About women rebuilding their futures. About voices that had been background noise for years finally getting amplified. I didn't mention all of plus time. I didn't need to. 2 days later, the piece went live online. My name was there, clear as day. A quote beneath my photo read, "Sometimes we don't need to shout. We just need to be in the right room." My phone buzzed all day. Friends from college, old coworkers, even my old boss in Austin messaged me. It was overwhelming in the best way. For once, I didn't feel like I had to explain how I got there. I just got to be there. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, white, not red, and toasted no one. It tasted like freedom. About a week after the article came out, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I usually don't answer unknowns, but something in me said to pick up. It was my mother. There was a pause, like she expected me to fill the silence first. Then she said, "So I saw the article." I waited. "Yeah? You didn't mention all of plus time." She said it like she was confused. As if it should have been obvious that I owed her a footnote in my success story. I wasn't snide. I wasn't sarcastic. I just said, I didn't think it was relevant. More silence. Then she said something that truly blew me away. "I think we should have a family dinner. The 3 of us." I almost laughed. She clarified, me, her, and Sloane. "A chance to reconnect," she said. She was hosting it at the restaurant, of course. "Just a few close friends, maybe some of the city partners," she added, like this was a corporate meeting and not some awkward ambush. Now, old me, the version of me who spent years seeking crumbs of approval, would have said yes immediately. Would have fixed my hair, practiced my smile, and shown up ready to forgive and forget for the 100th time. But not this Delaney. "I'll think about it," I told her. And I meant it. I didn't want to let her back in too easily. That night, I called Devin. I explained what she said, and he listened quietly, then asked, "What do you want to happen?" I thought about it for a long time. I want her to see who I am now. Not who she thinks I am. Not the helper. Not the backup. He said, then go. But go on your terms. So I made a plan. The dinner was 3 weeks later. I RSVP'd late, just a few days before, and requested to bring a guest. My mom replied with a passive, of course. I walked into Olive Plus Time that Friday night in a tailored black jumpsuit and minimalist heels. My makeup is subtle but sharp. My guest? Reisa, co-founder of the new hospitality venture. Charismatic, razor intelligent, and the kind of woman who turns heads just by listening. The restaurant looked nice, I'll give her that. Candlelight glow, live string quartet in the corner, the kind of layout designed for Instagram stories. My mom was near the host stand. She gave me an air kiss, eyes flicking over Reisa, clearly trying to place her. This is Reisa, I said calmly. My business partner. Oh, she said, trying to sound impressed. How nice. I saw Sloane from across the room, still glowing, still staged. She looked surprised to see me. Maybe even rattled. Good. They seated us near the front. I noticed the place cards. Sloane said, creative director. Mine said, nothing. Just Delaney. Cute. Midway through the evening, my mother clinked her glass and launched into a little speech, thanking the incredible women in her life. She thanked Sloane for her style, creativity, and constant support. She glanced at me and added, and to Delaney, for showing us that hard work always finds its reward. Everyone clapped. I smiled. Then I stood up. I actually want to say a few words, I said. Mom's smile froze. Sloane tilted her head like she smelled something off. I held the room gently. No mic. Just a voice. Confident, measured, warm. I grew up in a home where I thought the only way to earn love was to be useful. To be quiet. To be invisible until needed. I spent a lot of time behind the scenes. Until I realized I was helping build stories that weren't mine. The room was dead silent now. But this year, I stopped. I stopped apologizing. I stopped minimizing. I started working on something of my own. I turned slightly toward Reisa, who gave me the tiniest nod. And in a few months, we'll be opening our first space in Dallas, one that celebrates the people who've spent too long making other people look good. A place that's built on collaboration. On acknowledgement. I looked directly at my mother. And on giving credit where it's due. The applause wasn't thunderous. It wasn't a standing ovation. But it was real. A ripple of something honest passed through the room. Even some of my mom's friends looked slightly uncomfortable, realizing the subtext. My mom raised her glass with a tight smile. Sloane looked like she wanted to leave her own party. But I felt weightless. The next day, I posted a short clip of my toast on LinkedIn. Just the quote about building stories that are your own. It got picked up by a hospitality-focused publication. A week later, we had 2 more investors reach out about our concept. A month after that, Reisa and I were invited to speak on a panel about female-led restaurant design. My mom hasn't called since. But last week, I saw a new blog post from Sloane. When strong women stop competing and start celebrating. I didn't even click it. Because here's the thing, revenge doesn't have to be loud. Or cruel. Or messy. Sometimes revenge is just building something better. Quieter. And knowing that the people who counted you out are watching from a distance, wondering how you did it without them. And the answer is, I stopped waiting for permission. I stopped waiting to be invited to the table. I built my own.